She was betrayed, but her silent revenge shocked everyone. You never forget the exact moment when your world cracks apart. That's how it started for me. A single instant, so small it could have slipped past unnoticed. But instead, it etched itself into my memory like fire on stone. I can still hear the sound of his voice, steady and calm, telling me everything was fine. I can still see the way he smiled, pretending nothing was wrong. And I can still feel that sinking weight in my chest, the moment I realized he was lying. Trust isn't shattered all at once. No, it fractures slowly like glass under pressure. At first, it's invisible. Just a faint line. Something you tell yourself doesn't matter. But eventually, that line spreads. It reaches across everything you thought was solid. And before you even know it, the glass explodes and nothing is whole again. That's what he did to me. He broke my trust, not with one big mistake, but with 1,000 tiny cracks. Promises that sounded sweet but meant nothing. Smiles that hid secrets. Words that twisted the truth. And the worst part? I believed him. For so long, I believed him. I believed that the person I had chosen to trust would never betray me. I believed that the late nights, the sudden excuses, the missing details were just life. Not lies. I told myself that doubt was poison, that I had to push it down if I wanted peace. And so I did. Until one night, when all of those doubts came crashing down at once. It was late, the kind of late where the world feels quiet, where the shadows stretch long and heavy across your room. I couldn't sleep. Something inside me kept turning, like an alarm I couldn't silence. I reached for my phone. I don't even know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe fear. Maybe that deep instinctive whisper that tells you when something is wrong. And there it was. A single message, just a few words. Harmless to anyone else. But to me, it was a dagger. A message that didn't belong to me. A conversation I was never meant to see. And with it, the truth unfolded before my eyes. I remember staring at the screen, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. My hands shook. My chest burned. My thoughts raced. Was this real? Could this be true? Was he really hiding this from me? In that moment, every memory replayed in my head. Every smile, every excuse, every trust me he had ever spoken. And suddenly, they all looked different. They all carried a shadow. He had promised me honesty. He had promised me loyalty. He had promised me forever. And with one careless slip, he broke it all. The silence of that night was deafening. My world felt still, but inside me a storm was raging. I wanted answers. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pretend it wasn't happening. But deep down, I knew. This was only the beginning, because betrayal doesn't end with discovery. No, that's just where it starts. When trust is broken, you don't just lose the person who betrayed you. You lose the version of yourself who believed in them. And when that version of you dies, something else takes its place. Something stronger, something sharper, something that refuses to be fooled again. I didn't know it that night, but that broken promise would change everything. It would drag me down to my lowest point. It would push me to the edge of heartbreak and anger. And it would force me to rise again, not as the person he once knew, but as someone he could never predict. He thought I would stay silent. He thought I would cry, forgive, and forget. But what he didn't know was that I had already started imagining a different ending. One where the truth wasn't hidden anymore. One where he would feel the sting of betrayal. Yes, he broke my trust. But what came next would leave him absolutely speechless. If you had seen us back then, you would have said we were perfect. The couple everyone admired. The ones who laughed together, held hands in public, and shared those little glances that said more than words ever could. I used to catch people smiling at us, strangers, even friends, as if our happiness was something rare, something worth noticing. And honestly, for a long time, I believed it too. I believed that what we had was unshakable. That trust and loyalty were the foundation of everything we built. I would wake up every morning with a sense of comfort, the kind that makes you believe the world is safe, that love is strong enough to protect you from anything. He made me feel secure. He made me believe in forever. We had routines, rituals that felt like home. Sunday mornings filled with laughter over coffee. Late night drives where music filled the silence between us. Inside jokes that only we understood. Words that carried memories, reminders of who we were and how far we'd come. It felt like something out of a story. And maybe that was the problem. Stories are rarely as perfect as they seem at first glance. Looking back now, I see it clearly. The small cracks were already there, just faint enough to ignore. A moment when he looked away too quickly. A pause before answering a simple question. The way he sometimes checked his phone with a guarded expression, as though the screen carried secrets he didn't want me to see. But back then, I brushed it all aside. We all do, don't we? When we're in love, we tell ourselves not to be paranoid. We convince ourselves that trust means silence, that to question is to doubt, and to doubt is to ruin the fragile peace we hold so dearly. So I stayed quiet. I believed the version of him that smiled at me, not the version that flickered in the shadows. It wasn't just about him, though. It was about us, the life we were building together. The friends who looked at us and said, "You two are perfect." The family who said, "He's the one." The little voice inside me that whispered, "Don't ruin this. Don't question happiness when it's finally here." I didn't know it then, but I was clinging to a picture, not a person. A picture of love, trust, and security. A picture that looked flawless, but behind the frame, the paint was already peeling. There was one night in particular that I think about often. We were sitting under the stars talking about the future. He painted a vision so beautiful I could almost see it. The house, the laughter, the years stretching out before us. I remember feeling a lump in my throat. Not from sadness, but from joy so overwhelming it scared me. I thought, how could I ever deserve something this perfect? But even in that moment, a shadow passed over his face. Just for a second. A flicker so quick I almost missed it. A glance at his phone, a shift in his voice, a sudden rush to change the subject. It was small, almost nothing. And yet, deep down, a part of me felt it. That faint, quiet unease, but I silenced it, because when life feels perfect, you don't want to admit the cracks. You don't want to imagine that the ground beneath your feet might be weaker than it looks. I told myself love was enough. I told myself trust was unshakable. I told myself forever was real, and maybe that's why betrayal hurts so much. Because it doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes after promises, after laughter, after those nights when you swore nothing could ever come between you. It comes when you least expect it. When you're standing in the middle of your perfect beginning. That was my life before everything changed. A love story that looked flawless on the surface. A bond I thought nothing could break. A trust so strong I believed it was unshatterable. But beneath it all, the cracks were spreading. Quietly, patiently. Waiting for the right moment to split wide open. And when they did, everything I thought I knew came crashing down. At first, the changes were so small, I almost convinced myself they didn't exist. A missed call here. A delayed response there. A smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Nothing big. Nothing dramatic. Just little ripples on the surface of what I still believed was a calm and perfect sea. But ripples have a way of spreading. I remember one evening clearly. We had planned to have dinner together. Something simple, just the two of us, the way we always did. I cooked, set the table, and waited. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2. When he finally walked through the door, his excuse was ready, wrapped in a tired smile. Work ran late, he said. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Who doesn't stay late at work sometimes? But still, something in his tone felt rehearsed. Like the words had been practiced on the way home, over and over again, until they sounded smooth enough to pass as truth. I brushed it off. I told myself not to be paranoid. Don't ruin a good thing with doubt, I whispered in my head, but the excuses kept coming. A last-minute meeting, a sudden project, a phone that was acting weird and couldn't take calls. The stories piled up like bricks, each one building a wall between us. And yet, whenever I asked questions, he had a way of turning it around. "Why don't you trust me?" he'd ask, his eyes narrowing with just enough hurt to make me feel guilty. "Why are you overthinking everything?" He'd sigh as though my questions were the real problem. "You're imagining things. You know I'd never lie to you." And maybe that's what stung the most. The way he made me question my own instincts. It's called gaslighting, though I didn't know the word back then. All I knew was that I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Each time I noticed something strange, he'd twist it, making me believe I was the one at fault for even noticing. Like the night he left his phone on the table. It lit up with a message, a name I didn't recognize. When I asked, his smile was calm, almost amused. "She's just a coworker." Stop making it weird. His tone made me feel small, ridiculous for even asking. I laughed it off, pretending to believe him. Pretending his calmness meant innocence, not skillful deception. But late at night, when the world was quiet and there was no one to convince but myself, I couldn't stop the questions. Was I imagining it? Or was the truth right in front of me? The hardest part wasn't the lies. It was the confusion, the not knowing, the tug of war between my heart and my head. My heart said, trust him. You love him. My head whispered, something isn't right. And I was trapped in the middle, afraid to pick a side. Because if I believed my instincts, it meant the life I thought was perfect was nothing but a mirage. And if I ignored them, I could keep pretending that forever was still possible, pretending that the cracks weren't spreading wider every day. There was one night that made everything harder to ignore. He got home late again, far too late. His shirt smelled faintly of perfume, one that wasn't mine. My stomach twisted, but when I asked, he laughed. Don't be ridiculous, he said. Do you know how crazy that sounds? You really think I'd do that to you? His laughter cut deeper than anger ever could, because it made me feel foolish. It made me question myself, doubt my senses, dismiss my own reality. And against all reason, I let him convince me again. That's the danger of love, isn't it? It blinds you. It makes you choose the comfort of lies over the pain of truth. It convinces you that doubt is betrayal, when really, sometimes doubt is the only thing trying to save you. But I wasn't ready to see that yet. I wasn't ready to let go of the picture of perfection I had clung to for so long. So I stayed quiet. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I played along with the version of us that he wanted the world to see, even as the cracks grew deeper, even as the lies piled higher, even as the unease inside me grew louder with every passing day. I didn't know it then, but those first signs of trouble weren't just warning signs. They were the beginning of the storm. And storms don't disappear when you ignore them. They only grow stronger. They say the truth always comes out. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper. Other times, like a thunderclap that shatters the silence of your life. For me, it came on a night I will never forget. I hadn't been looking for answers that evening. Not really. I was tired. Tired of the doubts. Tired of the constant guessing game. Tired of feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. All I wanted was peace. But instead, I found the very thing I had been running from, the truth. He had left his phone on the counter, carelessly, as if he had nothing to hide. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it. I wasn't the type to snoop. Trust, after all, had always been sacred to me. But that night, something inside me wouldn't let it go. That voice, the one I had silenced for so long, finally screamed too loud to ignore. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I told myself I wouldn't look. I told myself it was wrong. But then the screen lit up, a message, bold and bright, impossible to unsee. Just a few words, simple, casual. But to me, they were like poison dripping onto glass, spreading cracks through everything I thought I knew. I had such a great time with you tonight. Can't wait to see you again. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. And in that frozen silence, the world around me shifted. I scrolled, unable to stop myself. Message after message. Laughter, secrets, plans. Words that should have belonged to us. Given freely to someone else. I felt my stomach twist. My chest tighten until it hurt to breathe. My hands went cold. My vision blurred with tears I didn't want to shed. Every line I read was another dagger. Every emoji, every promise, every "I miss you" was a nail in the coffin of the life I thought we had. It was betrayal laid bare. No excuses. No way to spin it. No way to pretend anymore. And yet part of me still wanted to deny it. My mind screamed, maybe it's not what it looks like. Maybe it's just a joke. Maybe it's work. Maybe, but my heart knew better. I wasn't imagining things this time. The proof was right in front of me, written in the very device he had guarded so fiercely. I dropped the phone, the sound echoing in the quiet of the room. My knees felt weak, my body heavy. I wanted to scream, to break something, to demand answers. But all I could do was stand there shaking, while my entire world collapsed in silence. The betrayal wasn't just in the words on that screen. It was in every memory that now felt tainted. Every "I love you" that suddenly rang hollow. Every promise he had ever made, now nothing but lies. And the worst part? It wasn't just the messages. It was realizing how blind I had been. How many times I had ignored the signs. How many times I had chosen comfort over truth. I felt foolish, small, broken. When he walked in later that night, I couldn't even look at him. His smile, his casual hey, felt like a mask, one I could finally see through. My silence must have unsettled him, but he didn't ask. He didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. I went to bed that night with my back to him, my mind spinning in circles. I barely slept. The pain was too sharp, too raw. My chest ached with anger and heartbreak all tangled together. I felt like I was drowning in a storm of emotions, betrayal, confusion, grief, rage, but somewhere in the middle of that storm, a new feeling began to rise. It was faint at first, just a spark, but it grew stronger with every passing moment. It was the thought that this betrayal, this devastation would not be the end of me, because betrayal may break you, but it also wakes you. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my tears drying on my cheeks. And I made a silent promise to myself. I would not let him destroy me. I would not let him walk away unscathed. I would not remain the victim of his lies. Yes, he broke my trust. Yes, he shattered everything I thought was real. But little did he know, I wasn't going to stay broken. The night I discovered the truth, I felt something inside me shatter. And the days that followed were nothing short of a freefall. At first, it was sadness. The kind that wraps around you like a heavy blanket you can't push off. I cried when no one was watching. In the shower, on my pillow, in the quiet moments when the world slowed down and I couldn't escape my thoughts. I cried for the love I thought I had, for the promises that meant nothing, for the version of myself who had believed every word he ever spoke. But sadness doesn't stay soft forever. Slowly, it hardened into anger. I would replay the messages in my mind, hearing the laughter he shared with someone else, seeing the promises he had no right to make. Every word was a spark, and together they set fire to my heart. I burned with fury, with betrayal, with the ache of knowing he looked me in the eye and lied without flinching. And then came shame. I wasn't ashamed of him. No, his actions were his own. I was ashamed of myself. Ashamed that I ignored the signs. Ashamed that I let him twist my instincts, make me doubt my own sanity. Ashamed that I believed in a picture-perfect love while cracks were forming right beneath my feet. Shame is heavy. It clings to you, whispers in your ear, tells you that you weren't enough. That maybe if you had been prettier, smarter, kinder, louder, quieter, maybe then he wouldn't have betrayed you. Of course, deep down I knew it wasn't true. Betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed. But in the aftermath, logic means little. Feelings drown out reason. And then there was the pressure. Friends asking why I looked so tired. Family wondering why I sounded distant. Everyone expecting me to keep up the same smile, the same story, the same version of myself that no longer existed. And society. Oh, society loves to talk. People love the image of perfect couples. They love the fairy tale. They don't want to see the truth behind closed doors. So I stayed quiet. I kept up appearances. I laughed at the right times. I posted the right pictures. I played the part, even when my heart was breaking behind the curtain. But silence is suffocating. Pretending takes more energy than grieving. And soon I realized I couldn't keep living in the shadows of his lies. One night, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, my face pale, my spirit drained. I barely recognized the reflection staring back at me. And in that moment, I asked myself, is this who you want to be? Broken? Silent? Defeated? The answer was no. I couldn't change what he had done. I couldn't erase the betrayal. But I could decide how I responded to it. I could choose whether I let it define me or whether I used it to rebuild myself into someone stronger. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I needed to do something. Not for him. Not to win him back. Not to make him understand. But for me. For the part of me that had been silenced. For the part of me that still deserved justice. Because betrayal takes away your power. And the only way to heal is to take it back. And so with trembling hands but a steady heart, I began to imagine something new. A plan, a way to shift the story. A way to make sure the lies he had built would come crashing down. Not on me, but on him. Yes, I had been broken. But now, I was ready to rise. There comes a point when pain turns into power. For weeks, I had been drowning in sadness, anger, and shame. But one night, something inside me clicked. I was done being the victim of his lies. I was done crying over someone who didn't deserve my tears. I was done letting him control the story. If he thought I would stay broken, he was wrong. At first, I didn't know what I was going to do. My mind ran wild with possibilities, each idea more tempting than the last. But I wasn't looking for chaos. I didn't want to stoop to his level. No, I wanted something sharper, smarter, something that would shake him to his core without me ever raising my voice, because revenge doesn't always come with fire and fury. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is quiet, calculated, and unforgettable. So I began to plan. I started small. Observing, taking notes, paying attention to the little details I had ignored before. His routines, his habits, the lies he told not just to me but to others. I watched carefully, pretending to play the same loyal role, all while collecting the very threads that would eventually unravel him. It wasn't easy. Every smile I faked felt like a mask that grew heavier by the day. Every "I love you" I forced out of my mouth tasted bitter. But I kept going because I knew patience was my greatest weapon. If I wanted this to work, I couldn't rush it. Late at night, when he was asleep, I would sit alone and think. My journal became my confidant, pages filled with questions and strategies. How do you expose a liar without a single scream? How do you make someone feel the weight of their betrayal without ever lifting a hand? Slowly, an idea began to form. Not a wild fantasy, but a real plan. A plan that would turn his secrets against him. I wouldn't confront him directly. That's what he expected. He was prepared for tears, for accusations, for anger. He had already rehearsed his denials, his gaslighting, his clever ways of twisting words. No, I wasn't going to give him the chance. Instead, I would let him trap himself. I began to gather evidence. Not in a dramatic, movie-like way, quietly, methodically, messages, patterns, little truths hidden in plain sight. Things he thought I'd never notice. Every piece was like a puzzle, and the picture was becoming clearer with each passing day. And as I collected the pieces, I started weaving my own narrative. A story that looked like his life, but with the mask stripped away. The suspense kept me awake at night, but not from fear, from anticipation. I could see the shift in myself. I was no longer the broken, tear-stained version of me who discovered those first messages. I was stronger now. Colder, maybe. Sharper. Every time he lied to my face, every time he brushed me off with a flimsy excuse, I smiled inside. Because I knew something he didn't. His days of control were numbered. There was one moment I'll never forget. We were sitting at dinner, and he was telling me about another late night at work. His story was smooth, almost flawless. He didn't know I already had the proof that he hadn't been anywhere near the office. He didn't know I had already spoken to someone who confirmed it. He didn't know I was sitting there, nodding, smiling, playing along, while holding the power of the truth in my hands. That's when it hit me. I wasn't powerless anymore. He was. Because the moment someone underestimates you, the moment they believe they've broken you beyond repair, that's the moment you become unstoppable. The plan wasn't finished yet. Not even close. But the foundation was there, and every day it grew stronger. I knew timing was everything. When the moment came, it had to be perfect, undeniable, unforgettable. A single move that would leave him speechless, stripped of his lies and exposed for who he truly was. And until that moment arrived, I would wait. I would smile. I would pretend, because revenge, when done right, isn't rushed. It's patient. It's deliberate. It's a storm that builds quietly on the horizon, until one day it breaks without warning, and when it did, he would never see it coming. The waiting was over. The plan was ready, and now it was time to move. For weeks, I had collected the pieces of his lies, the late-night texts, the sudden excuses, the stories that never lined up. Quietly, patiently, I had built a puzzle he didn't even know existed. And now, the picture was complete. But what's the use of a puzzle if no one sees it? That was the heart of my plan. Not to scream, not to fight, not to beg, but to expose. To let his own actions speak louder than any word I could say. To make sure that when the truth came out, it wasn't just me who saw it. It was everyone, and so I began. The first step was subtle. I didn't confront him, not directly. Instead, I played along. I smiled when he lied. I nodded when he fed me excuses. I pretended I was still the same trusting partner who once believed every word he said. And the more I pretended, the bolder he became. He grew careless, reckless even, because he thought he had me exactly where he wanted me, blind and obedient. But what he didn't know was that every careless move he made was another rope tightening around him. The second step was timing. I had to choose the perfect moment. Not just any night, not just any argument. No, it had to be when his guard was completely down. When he was surrounded by the very people he wanted to impress. When the exposure would cut the deepest. That's when I decided. It would happen during the dinner. He had planned it himself. A small gathering with friends, colleagues, people who believed he was flawless. People who thought we were flawless. The perfect couple. The golden image. That was the stage I chose for the truth. The days leading up to it were agonizing. My heart raced every time I rehearsed it in my mind. What if I slipped? What if he caught on? What if he twisted it all back on me? There were moments when I nearly lost my nerve. One night, as I sat across from him, watching him scroll through his phone with that secretive little smile, I thought about giving up. About walking away quietly. About letting him keep his mask while I carried the truth alone. But then I remembered the messages. The lies. The way he laughed when he made me feel crazy for asking questions. And the fear turned into fire again. No, this time he wouldn't escape. The night of the dinner arrived. I remember staring at myself in the mirror before we left. For the first time in weeks, I didn't see the broken, tear-stained version of me. I saw someone stronger. Someone who was about to take back control. He didn't suspect a thing. He was relaxed, confident, even affectionate. His hand on my shoulder, his voice soft in my ear as he whispered, "We're going to have a great night." Oh, he had no idea. The dinner started like any other. Laughter, wine glasses clinking, stories being shared around the table. He was in his element, charming, witty, the man everyone admired. The man everyone thought they knew. And then, when the moment was just right, I made my move. I pulled out my phone, calmly, casually, as though I was about to show a funny picture or a meme. He smiled at me, oblivious, already turning toward the group as if to prepare for the joke I was about to share. But instead of a joke, I opened the messages. The room fell silent. One by one, the faces around the table leaned closer, eyes widening as they read the words that weren't meant for them. His words, his secrets, his betrayal. I didn't need to say a thing. The proof spoke for itself. I watched him freeze, the color draining from his face. His smile faltered, then disappeared entirely. He stammered, reaching for explanations that wouldn't come. His hands shook as he tried to laugh it off, but no one was laughing with him. Not this time. The silence was heavier than any scream, and in that silence I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. He tried to twist it, of course. "This isn't what it looks like," he whispered, his voice desperate. But the evidence was undeniable. The names. The dates. The words he had typed with his own hands. Lies, laid bare for everyone to see. For the first time, the mask was gone. And he knew it. He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Not the broken partner he thought he had crushed, but the one who had outsmarted him. The one who had set the stage, lit the spotlight, and pulled back the curtain. The room buzzed with shock, whispers, disbelief. And in the center of it all, he sat exposed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. I simply looked at him and said, "The truth always comes out." And then, I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence swallow him whole. Would it work? Would it truly break the image he had so carefully built? Would people believe me, or would they side with him? Those questions raced through my mind even as the night unfolded. But one thing was certain. The trap had been sprung. He was no longer in control. I was. And as I watched him struggle, stutter, and shrink under the weight of his own lies, I realized something. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's as simple as letting the truth shine where the lies once lived. And for him, that was enough. There are moments in life when everything slows down, when seconds stretch into minutes, and every detail burns itself into memory. That night at that dinner table was one of those moments. The messages glowed on my phone screen. His words, his secrets, his lies. And they weren't just mine to carry anymore. They were in the open now, in the hands and eyes of people who once admired him, trusted him, believed in him. The silence was crushing. Not awkward, not casual, crushing. I could hear the clink of a glass being set down, the sharp inhale of someone reading over my shoulder, the faint creak of a chair as someone shifted uncomfortably. All around us, people were frozen in disbelief. And there he was, across from me. His face told the whole story. The practiced charm, the confident smile, the easy laughter, all of it vanished in an instant. What was left was raw panic. His lips parted, searching for words, but nothing came. His hands fumbled at the table, as if trying to grab onto something solid. Anything. But there was nothing left for him to hold on to. For the first time since the betrayal, I saw him powerless. He tried, of course. He always did. His first instinct was denial. "This isn't real," he whispered, his voice unsteady. "You don't understand. This is..." Taken out of context, but no one believed him. Not this time, because context doesn't change a lie. Context doesn't erase a betrayal. Context doesn't make broken promises whole again. The people at the table, his friends, his colleagues, the very ones he had worked so hard to impress, they were watching him unravel. Some shook their heads. Others avoided his gaze entirely. A few looked at me with pity, sympathy, maybe even respect. And me? I sat there, calm, silent, almost serene, because the plan had worked. For weeks, I had lived with the weight of his betrayal pressing down on my chest. For weeks, I had wondered if I was imagining things, if maybe I was the problem, if maybe I was overreacting. For weeks, he had made me doubt myself, gaslight myself, question my own reality. But now there was no doubt. No gaslighting. No lies that could smooth this over. The truth was right there in front of him, and it had teeth. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding, but my face steady. And when I finally spoke, my voice was calm, steady, sharp. "Everything you thought you could hide," I said, "is right here. You thought you could lie to me, make me doubt myself. But look around you. You're not just lying to me anymore. You're lying to them. To everyone. And now they know." His eyes darted around the room, desperate for support, for someone, anyone, to back him up. But no one did. That was the moment I saw it. The exact second he realized it was over, and it wasn't just about the dinner or the messages or the lies. It was about the image he had built, the perfect mask he wore so proudly. In one single night, it had all crumbled. That was the climax. That was the breaking point. I could feel the release inside me, like chains snapping one by one. The heaviness in my chest lifted. The endless loop of questions in my mind finally went silent. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't overreacting. I had been betrayed. And I had proven it. He sat there, speechless, powerless, stripped of the control he had once held so tightly. And I finally felt free. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to beg for an apology that would never come. The truth itself was enough. The rest of the dinner was a blur. People excused themselves awkwardly, muttering polite goodbyes. Some couldn't even look at him as they left. By the time the room cleared, it was just the two of us, sitting across from each other in the wreckage of what he had done. He tried again, in a last-ditch effort. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, almost pleading. "We can work this out, just..." "Don't ruin me," I almost laughed. "Don't ruin me?" He had already ruined everything we had. The difference was, I had finally stopped protecting him from his own truth. I stood up, my hands steady, my voice even steadier. "You did this to yourself. I just stopped covering for you." And with that, I walked away. The air outside was cool, almost sharp against my skin, but it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. My heart was still racing, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. From freedom. From knowing that I had faced the betrayal head-on and taken back my power. The climax wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It wasn't chaotic. It was quiet, clean, sharp, and in that quiet, I found my peace. The days after the reveal felt strange. For so long, my life had been filled with questions, suspicions, and the heavy shadow of betrayal. I had lived in a constant state of tension, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for another lie to surface. But now, the lies were out in the open. The mask was gone. And for the first time in months, maybe years, the silence around me didn't feel suffocating. It felt peaceful. Still, peace doesn't come all at once. I won't lie. The aftermath was messy. The betrayal left scars. People whispered. Some pitied me. Others avoided me, unsure of what to say. And yes, there were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had all come to this. How something that once felt so safe, so perfect, had shattered into pieces. But in those quiet moments, I also realized something powerful. I wasn't broken anymore. He had tried to break me. His lies, his gaslighting, his betrayal. They had pushed me to the edge. But I had climbed back. I had stood up, faced the truth, and taken back my voice. And in doing so, I found a strength I never knew I had. The truth is, betrayal doesn't just destroy relationships. It forces you to confront yourself, to ask hard questions, to rebuild from the ground up, and that's exactly what I started to do. I began with small steps. Journaling every day, not just to vent, but to remind myself of who I was before the lies clouded my vision. Reconnecting with friends I had pulled away from, the ones who had quietly stood by me even when I doubted myself. Spending more time with family, allowing their love to remind me that not everyone in this world was out to deceive. Little by little, the heaviness lifted. He, on the other hand, had his own storm to deal with. His carefully crafted image was gone. The whispers followed him instead of me now. People looked at him differently, saw him for who he truly was. And though a part of me once longed for him to feel that pain, I realized something. I didn't need to watch his downfall anymore. His choices were his own punishment. Mine was freedom. I learned to breathe again, to laugh again, to trust myself again. That was the real victory. Not his exposure, not the silence at that dinner table, but the fact that I had picked myself up from the ashes and built something stronger. Looking back, I see the betrayal differently now. At first, it felt like the end of my world. But in truth, it was the end of his world, the one built on lies. For me, it was a beginning. Painful, yes, but necessary, because sometimes life breaks you to rebuild you. Sometimes trust shatters so you can learn to trust yourself. Sometimes betrayal teaches you the lesson you never wanted, but always needed. I no longer carry the shame. I no longer carry the doubt. What I carry now is clarity, strength, the knowledge that I will never let someone dim my light, twist my reality, or control my story again. As I moved forward, I realized that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering without the pain. It's about taking the lesson and leaving the hurt behind. And the lesson I carry is this: never underestimate your own strength. Because when everything fell apart, I didn't just survive. I rose. So yes, he broke my trust. But in doing so, he gave me the chance to discover my own resilience, my own voice, my own power. And that, more than anything, is the closure I needed. The pieces of my life may not fit back exactly the way they once did, but maybe that's the point. Maybe they're forming something new, something better. And as I step forward, I know one thing for certain. I am no longer defined by his betrayal. I am defined by how I chose to rise from it. When I look back now, I realize this story was never just about him. It was never just about the betrayal, or even the revenge. It was about me, and what I discovered about myself when I was forced to face the truth. Betrayal has a way of cutting deep, of making you question everything. Your judgment, your worth, your ability to ever trust again. It makes you feel small, powerless, invisible. And for a while, I let it do that to me. I let the lies define me. I let the pain control me. But here's the thing about pain. If you let it, it can shape you into someone stronger than you ever imagined. I used to believe that revenge was about making the other person pay, about balancing the scales, about making them hurt the way they made you hurt. But I learned something far more powerful. True revenge isn't about them at all. It's about reclaiming yourself. Yes, exposing him brought a moment of justice. Yes, seeing him speechless, stripped of his lies, felt like victory. But the real victory wasn't in his downfall. It was in my rise. Because the truth is, he didn't just break my trust. He gave me the chance to rebuild it, not in him, but in myself. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. We can't always control what people do to us. We can't always stop betrayal or lies or heartbreak. But we can control how we respond. We can choose to stay broken, or we can choose to rise. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever felt the sting of lies, I want you to know this. You are not weak for trusting. Trust is not a flaw. Trust is a gift. And if someone chooses to abuse it, that says everything about them, and nothing about your worth. Your strength doesn't come from never being hurt. It comes from standing back up after you've been knocked down, from refusing to let someone else's actions define who you are, from learning that sometimes the most powerful revenge is living free, living honest, and living true to yourself. So yes, I carried out my plan. Yes, he was exposed. But when the dust settled, I realized the story wasn't about his downfall at all. It was about my rebirth. And that's the truth I want to leave you with. Your worth doesn't vanish because someone failed to see it. Your value isn't diminished because someone betrayed it. You are still whole. You are still worthy. And you are still capable of building a life filled with love, trust, and strength, even after heartbreak. Because in the end, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about finding myself again.